perfect sense, as in it makes perfect sense, or the perfect, or your one's senses. It's a modern day world afflicted by what may or may not be a virus that manifests itself firstly by sufferers become overcome by paroxysms of despair and grief, and then they lose their sense of smell. Ewan McGregor is a chef. Eva Green is a scientist who's involved in looking into whether or not this is a virus. So obviously they're both directly affected by the outbreak of the virus, because he's a chef. Once people start to lose their sense of smell, it starts to affect their sense of taste. And as the virus, or whatever it is, it's never quite clear, continues to expand, other senses start to fall the same way, the next sense being the sense of taste. So one of the things that the film talks about is how the paroxysm of despair may be connected to the fact that smell is very closely related to memory. So as people lose their sense of smell, they also start to lose their sense of memory and very quickly adapt to a new world in which their senses are dulled and changed. Inevitably, the Ewan McGregor character and the Eva Green character start having a relationship. They start to discover each other just as the rest of the world starts to fall apart. Here's a clip.
Forget it, Michael. We're closed. We're closed.
We'll open again.
People can't smell, they can't taste. They're going to buy flour and fat. I mean, that's all you need to survive. Take a hit on that. Go on. Go on. Drink that. Now, that is damned expensive brandy. Damned expensive. But you might as well drink surgical spirit or sniff glue. Doesn't matter. It's flour and fat.
And yet it does matter.
There's no difference.
No, I think you're wrong. Life goes on. They'll come back. People will ask each other out to dinner again. They'll toast each other in there while we take care of their needs.
And serve them flour and fat.
No, anything but flour and fat. We'll be all right.
So the question is whether or not life does indeed go on as one's senses start to retreat. And this is it's an end of the world film, as portrayed by the senses shutting down. Funnily enough, obviously, there is a connection with Zentropa, because the writer, Kim Foots-Akerson, did we have anything on?
Yes.
Go on.
This is from... Now, see, I don't actually know how
you can't pronounce the
name.
name.
Well, if it was... The first name, if it was French, would be Mille. It's M-I-L-L-E.
Fine, yes.
And the surname is C-Y-C-O-N. So is it Millisicon?
No idea.
Millisicon. Anyway.
Millisicon was a hit stage show, wasn't it? Miss Saigon.
Miss Saigon.
Yeah,
so that was a joke which sort of...
Moving on. Kim Foots-Akerson.
Yes, this is how to pronounce Kim Foots-Akerson.
Foops.
Kim Foots.
Akerson.
The double A sounds almost like a O,
okay,
and is in fact the same as the strange letter A with a little circle on top, which only exists in Scandinavia.
Okay, fine.
As for Nicholas Winding Refn...
Yeah.
Winding is Vinding.
Vinding.
W and V are pronounced exactly the same in Danish.
Okay.
So it's Nicholas
Vinding.
Lingding bus stop
Stang biscuit barrel.
Refn.
Thank you. This is the screenplay. Kim Foots is a Danish writer.
Who is?
Kim Foots-Akerson.
Thank you.
Is a Danish writer. And what happened was that David Mackenzie, who directed this, said that originally the script was written to be set in Denmark, but he said that because it wouldn't work in Denmark because they just solved the problem, because they're much too efficient. They just sort it all out and they solved the problem. So he said it needed to be set somewhere in a city that was in a state of collapse anyway, so he moved it to Glasgow, which I'm think is going to win him few friends. I mean, he's had an interesting career, because in the past he's directed Young Adam, and most recently he did that You Instead, which was all over the place. Hallam Foe was, I think, the thing that he got the most attention for. This, for my money, is David Mackenzie's best film. It does compare to Melancholia, not simply because of the Zentropa connection, but because it is, in the end, a film about the world apparently coming to some cataclysmic apocalyptic event, and yet playing that out through individual characters and very, very personal little vignettes. But in fact, in terms of its tone, it's closer to the tone of Never Let Me Go, which I thought was very interesting. A lot of people really didn't like it. Or even the tone of something like Children of Men, which I thought was, a very interesting movie, and a very intriguing, another way of doing the apocalypse, again doing it on a much smaller scale. It raises all those questions about
the
what
P.D. James book.
Yeah, exactly.
Children of Men.
Yeah, but you saw Children of Men, because I think you and I saw that together. And Giles Nutkin, who's the cinematographer, does a brilliant job of shooting it, and it's all done with a pretty low budget. It's done, with a very confined view to some extent, and yet somehow you do get the sense that this problem is playing out all over the world. But essentially what it's about is, as your senses shut down, what does each sense mean to you? Can you readjust to the world as those senses change? And also, because it's about communication between people, what are the ways in which we communicate? Strangely enough, the same day that I watched this, I watched the DVD extras on Le Quattro Volte, because I was reviewing that on DVD. And there's a whole section in that in which Fromentino talks about that film being about man's alienation from and separation from the world around him. And although these are very, very different films, there is some kind of connection in there. The thing that I liked best about this was it is, in that old-fashioned science fiction sense, a science fiction story that has an idea at its centre. It's not, about, robots and machines and the rest of it. It's science fiction in the way that Kurt Vonnegut would write science fiction. What if the following thing happened? How would you react to it on a human level? It is about the human responses to something which is never fully explained. And I actually found it surprisingly moving. I went into it being somewhat sceptical, because Ewan said I didn't like at all. And I knew nothing about the premise, about what the film was about, only the title. And I have to say, I found it surprisingly interesting, surprisingly moving, and certainly I think David Mackenzie's best film. A very good and winning central performance from Ewan McGregor, who I think does a good job of playing the character who, on the one hand, at the beginning of it, is emotionally cut off, and yet, as senses shut down, starts to develop connections that he didn't think he was going to develop. And it was one of those movies, and very much like Never Let Me Go, although I understand that people didn't like Never Let Me Go. I think they're wrong. I think it's a better film than people gave it credit for, and I think people will realise that as time goes by. It was one of those films that stayed with me, and I thought about it for a lot afterwards, and that is, in the end, what a really good science fiction movie will do. It will raise the what-if scenario, and make. It was quite moving, and there were certain moments of it that were surprisingly spine-tingling, so I was impressed.